Welcome to our ND Community Podcast. I'm Catherine and I'm a mother to 3 autistic ADHD daughters.
My name is Lorna and I'm a mother to an autistic son. We are going to be exploring stories and resources around lived ND experiences here in Guernsey. In this podcast, we're speaking to Deputy Sarah Hansmann Rouxel, and we're going to talk about all things ND in the States.
So, Sarah, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
And congratulations on your election as deputy. It must have been quite a roller coaster.
It was very emotionally intensive, and definitely coming 38th and the way that they announced the results was not great for my stress levels.
I bet. And this is the second time you've sat as a deputy.
Yes.
Tell us about the first time and what you found.
So the first time I ran as deputy was in the electoral district system, so I ran for Vale, and the whole election process is very, very different. But then arriving in the assembly, you also have a different sense of the assembly because you've only spent time with the candidates in your area. You haven't got to know people outside of your area. And then sort of working in the States.
So, Sarah, do you have a diagnosis?
I do, actually. It's quite recent. So when I first was in the States, I wasn't diagnosed. But now with the diagnosis, a lot of things make sense in how I operated in the States the first time. And actually, it's given me a lot of structure to go back into the States. I think there was a long time where I thought, actually, I'm just not capable of doing it because of how things had unraveled a little bit.
So how do you think you'll do it differently? What will change?
So as a new deputy, there was so much to learn. Yeah. And as is, I hyper-focused on so many things. And now I understand that that's what that is. Yeah. And it's about being able to manage when you hyper-focus, acknowledging, look, this is going to be an area that I know I'm going to hyper-focus into, and sort of structuring the time around that. Whereas before, it was just overwhelming. There was so much, and I just couldn't stop myself because I didn't want to stop because it was my hyper-focus. So there were really big legislative things that, for instance, very gnarly, controversial social issues like assisted dying came up, and I had never considered anything around that. But also, as the state's disability champion, I needed to look at it from both perspectives. And as is my nature with very strong social justice, I do want to give both arguments. And so therefore, I went down the rabbit hole of both sides of the argument and researched for days. And I would find that I couldn't stop myself. So I was staying up till 2, 3 in the morning because I was also getting emails from people. And again, that's another piece of input that you get, and I'd want to add that to the mosaic of thought that was going into deciding on how to present the argument. So the process the first time round was incredibly overwhelming, and now, obviously, there aren't going to be new issues that many new issues like that because I've done them once before. But when there is something new that needs to be delved into like that, I'm better able to filter some of the input, and that it is purely understanding. Okay, that's what was happening. So the diagnosis gave me the understanding.
I love that because we had a podcast with Laura Spence, and she said exactly the same thing. So she had a diagnosis later on in life, and I said, well, what would you say is the benefits of having a diagnosis later on in life? And she said, well, actually, because it comes with care instructions. And I love that. And I kind of get the feeling that you kind of went on the same journey, that it wasn't a diagnosis for the sake of a diagnosis. It was to have those care instructions. So you've kind of learned that you have the ability to maybe go down rabbit holes because you want to cover absolutely every single topic, to be fair, as you said, and that I think would make a really good politician, actually. So that's fantastic. But it's when you stop and it's when you cut it off and when you don't reach that burnout stage. Yeah. So knowing that hopefully will put you in a much better position, not just for the States, but also for your own personal health as well.
Absolutely. And I mean, originally, it was my youngest got a diagnosis, and I went on the parent-teen.
It's like an early bird autism course.
Yeah. Yes, and it was really, really interesting because it was the first time that I had heard all the traits about women, and I sat there each week going, ka-ping, tick, tick, tick. So I hadn't considered it before, and as I was sitting there, so many things suddenly fell into place, and I got more and more into the process, and I was like, actually, and explored that. And that's been incredibly helpful, also getting the diagnosis so that I'm more confident in all of the things that I was doing automatically, but now I'm actually able to couch them to my youngest and say, look, I don't know if you'll find this useful, but this is what I developed, by masking or whatever coping mechanisms that I developed. This is what I do in those situations, and this is why I find it stressful or triggering, and it might be for you. And that's been a really powerful conversation between the two of us. And it doesn't always work because they're just autistic, and I have autism with ADHD as well. So the ADHD brings in a more erratic side to things, whereas they're far more contained.
It's interesting, you were talking earlier about your feeling about social justice and your hyperfocus, which are a great combination actually for going and exploring and researching things. But I also wonder, I think a lot of people out there assume that autistic people are not empathetic, and I would argue that actually potentially we have more empathy and more feeling and emotion around that. How do you manage all of that? Because there's a lot coming at you.
Yeah, and actually it's quite interesting that you mentioned that. One of the things that happened my first term and was I noticed getting up to speak, having pure logic, and then ending up welling up with emotion. And it was so difficult to describe to people that this isn't tears because I am so sad and broken. It is tears. My logical brain is still in train, but I just feel this so intensely that the tears need a release and they come out. And obviously in the news recently, there's been Rachel Reeves crying in Parliament, and there's a conversation going around that. And I also remember straight after I had lost in the 2020 election, a newspaper columnist wrote, he's very glad because there won't be all these tears in the Parliament. And I thought, well, that just misconstrues what had happened. At the beginning of my speech on assisted dying, which is obviously very, very emotive topic, I started off by saying that this is such an overwhelming topic that I may find myself tearing up, and I want you to understand that my brain is still engaged. Yeah. I might be crying, but it is not I'm not trying to elicit some kind of response, which is, I think, what traditionally people say is that, oh, you're crying to get attention.
Or they see it as a sign of weakness rather than a release.
Yeah.
And you know, as somebody who's autistic, you know that being misunderstood really, really frustrates me, and that to try and explain that this emotional response is not how you are viewing it. It is something that I don't think I've been successful in completely, but actually after that speech, the procurer, who also happens to be a woman, came up to me. She said, "I'm so glad that you said that, because it is true. You know, your brain is still there, but the emotion just comes out of you and needs some release."
Yeah. And I'm glad you did have the kind of capacity to advocate for yourself, because I think that's where a lot of autistic people struggle.
Yeah.
They really struggle to get their point across in a way that neurotypical people understand it. So this time around in the States, what do you hope will have evolved from an ND point of view? Because we're quite excited from the ND community. We feel like this could be the most neurodiverse states we've ever had, and that gives us so much kind of hope and positivity for like a new way forward. But so far, I know it's only been a weekend, but what's the feeling?
Well, firstly, it's still early days, but there has been a shift. Obviously, we have a new female president of Policy and Resources, but the feeling of collaboration, I think there is a whole piece of awareness that needs to happen, even from the outset, the actual election process for candidates. And one of the first things that happens in the new parliament is there's a review of the election from candidates and perspectives. And I think there's a piece of work around making it accessible, not only to the public. If you're neurodivergent and you are looking at all of these candidates, is that overwhelming?
It is overwhelming.
And some of the events, thinking about, well, for candidates and certainly for neurodivergent people, walking around just talking unstructured to people is my worst nightmare. So, you know, going to some of the events where you know you need to go, it becomes, it's quite inaccessible for candidates, but then also it's not really an accessible way for neurodivergent people to access that information, because it isn't really a structure and it requires you. There are no rules, so you don't know whether you're allowed to, and that creates a whole cascade of anxiety, which then stops you from wanting to engage in the process. So I think there's a piece of work that is just waiting to happen, and I don't think it would have happened if we didn't have the awareness, and certainly I bring that awareness just fresh in my mind into the States.
Sarah, can you tell us what maybe challenges you foresee as an ND person in the States?
Well, they're quite. There's a number of things. Like one of the issues that I had in the previous assembly, towards the end, when I was getting overwhelmed towards the end of the term, I would stand up and there were long pauses. And all of that was, there was too much processing going on in my head. And actually it got picked up on social media in little group chats. Oh, stuttering, this and that. And actually, I did a speech already just off the hoof about a procedural motion that somebody had laid now. And the same person who used to interject constantly when I did have pauses did the same thing. And I suddenly thought, okay, well, that's what I'm doing. And I didn't let it affect me because I understood now, having gone through the process, that it's a processing issue. But I think it would be helpful to explain that to the assembly, that this is what is happening. And if I do pause, I understand that your desire to help me out, or not, as the case may be, isn't because I don't have something to say. I've got too much to say, and that I can't decide which thing, and I am still processing what's to happen. I mean, one of the things that's happening today is we're having elections for presidents, and part of that is you are nominated, and then your nominator does a speech, you do a prepared speech, which is fine, and then there's question and answer times. But the question needs to be 30 seconds, so you've got a time limit on your questions, and the answers are no more than a minute. So, and that is not my superpower, because I might have to work on processing. Now, one of the things that I hope to do is to be on the committee for the States Assembly and Constitution Committee, and their job is to look at the rules of procedure, but also support for deputies to do their job. And I think part of that, I would really like to have the awareness part, but also looking at where there can be reasonable adjustments. And where it's not appropriate to have reasonable adjustments, I think awareness around that also then counterbalances where you can't, because these are the rules of the procedure. You can't, for instance, give longer time to one candidate and not the other candidate because it's not fair. Is there a way of helping train, so that you get used to answering in 30 seconds, or develop a technique to those, and that something like that isn't just helpful for neurodivergent people, it's helpful for new deputies as well. So it's looking at accessibility is always, when you open up accessibility, it actually helps more people than it changes things.
And you touched on social media there.
Yeah.
How on earth do you cope with all the stuff on social media? Again, that's something from our first term. Engaging on social media when you are not in power is you can just say whatever you want. And then when you are elected, I found it very difficult because I wanted to engage, but there was too many thoughts about, well, if I say this thing, it might be construed incorrectly. And so I stopped engaging on social media. But unfortunately, part of the issue is that creates a vacuum. Yeah. And then everybody gets into that vacuum. And I would read things about myself on social media or in the comment column of the Guernsey Press, and not be able to respond, and that sort of added to my withdrawal from doing things. Now, I know that about myself. One of the things that I have started to use is ChatGPT. Oh, good idea.
And that allows me to get a lot of those thoughts through, so I can get to the point where I'm actually able to write something, and I can test it with ChatGPT, saying like, well, this, if there's rules or anything in procedure, or there's anything I'm not 100% sure on, I can expand my knowledge base so that when I do reply, I get out of the loop of, oh, I can't do it, and then just frozen and not able to engage. And it's worked on and off. And I think managing how much and when I engage in social media, because again, I now know when there's lots of things. At the moment there's elections, and a lot of that is negotiating with other people and negotiating around and talking to people, and that's exhausting. I don't have the capacity to go anywhere near social media, even though there's part of me that I must update my page and speak to people, but I know that that's going to bring in reactions, and I don't have the space.
So what you're really talking about is an awareness of self-care then, and what you need to be able to do your job for the length that you need to do it, because otherwise by the end of 4 years you're going to be pretty burnt out, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. And that's such a good way of phrasing it. It's self-care, but it's the awareness that you have that informs your self-care.
For sure. Your care instructions, as Laura.
This is it. Back to those care instructions, and I think sometimes people kind of go back and forth about whether or not they should have a diagnosis or if it changes anything. But I think if it just gives you a better awareness about yourself and how to look after yourself, then I think it is worth it. There is that like funny saying that you hear people kind of mention, and they say, for years, like 40 years, I thought I was a strange horse. I got this diagnosis, and it turns out that I'm an exotic zebra. So, and I love that. And it's like, yeah, exactly. You know, it's knowing thyself, really. Let's be honest. And as you say, it's having those strategies to cope then that will ultimately make you better serving to our community, I think. Yeah. Because when you're at your best, you can give your best. Whereas if you're depleted and you're worn out and you're burnt out, there's really not much we can expect from you in that situation. So going forward, in an ideal situation, Sarah, what would you love to see from an ND perspective happening, not just in the States, from an awareness point of view, but in the community? What do you think needs to change?
I think the conversation needs to shift away from the disability frame and more to the enablement frame. That actually the way that neurodivergent people have existed in the sphere means that they're kind of hemmed in, and actually I know it's a bit trite, the whole superpowers thing, but actually when you provide or give a neurodivergent person the space to thrive, there is almost infinite possibility for what they can do. And actually with AI-enabled world, one of the things that actually really works with a neurodivergent brain is just being able to challenge and communicate with something that has infinite tabs open in the same way that your brain does. That piece of work across the States. So there's an awareness and a movement away from disabled to enable.
I'm guessing that's going to work across pretty much every single part of the States. So it will involve education, for example, and how we kind of look at educating our children who are ND, because I think it's no shock to say that they're being failed at the moment. They're like square peg round hole kind of a situation. So that's quite a big one. And then I think from a health point of view, there's a lot of concerns around it as well, because we find that some autistic or ND people have comorbid diagnosis as well, and treating them holistically as a whole as opposed to treating different parts of the person. It's quite fragmented, I think, at the moment in how things are done here in Guernsey. But hopefully what you've said there kind of overarches everything, and we come up with a holistic process to enable, to use your own word, to enable ND people in our community.
Yeah, well, absolutely, with the education, health, but then there's also economic enablement and the skills strategy, and looking at where those parts of the system aren't and they can be tweaked to actually enable things. A lot of what I see is there are pockets of things happening, so it doesn't necessarily require more resource. Yeah. The work is actually bridging those things together, it's exactly like you said. Part of that stems from the way the structure of the states is. So you've got HSC and you've got education, and they have their separate budgets, and then there are just pieces where some things are happening and not, it's not a cohesive pattern.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Sarah, awesome. Thanks so much for coming in to speak to us today. And just for the record, this is your first week in the States, really. So this, we really do appreciate you giving up your lunch hour to come in and speak to us today.
Thank you.
And we wish you the absolute very best, because we think you're just an absolute force, and I think you'll do some fantastic things. And I just want to say, for the record, you mentioned social media. You were the first one to reach out to us on social media to say, guys, I hear you, I see you, let's work together. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Yeah. It's wonderful to be seen.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks so much for having me, guys.
If there are people out there who are listening and either have similar experience, or if there's any success stories as well, so please, by all means, get in touch. We'd love to hear from you.
Just a quick shout out to EasyDo. Without EasyDo, we wouldn't be able to do this podcast. They've lent us all their tech. We're really grateful.
Thank you.